Hey guys, John here. I just wanted to uh, go ahead and kind of chronicle the experience I had hanging wallpaper for the first time in my father's home in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was an experience that I think is definitely worthwhile for you to do it yourself. I had hired a professional wallpaper hanger to do my headboard wall in my master bed in Los Angeles a couple years ago. And when he arrived, I watched him as he put up the wallpaper, and I thought, this seems pretty self-explanatory. One thing that he did that I didn't like was that he didn't center the paper the way I would have liked it in the room, considering it was a feature wall. So there's a couple of things that I've researched to see how we're taught to hang wallpaper and how, as a designer or with an aesthetic choice, you can change that and still implement the same safeguards to hang wallpaper in your home or in someone else's. Firstly, I ordered both rooms' wallpaper from wallpaperdirect.com. That is the website that I used when I hung the wallpaper in Los Angeles. It's no frills. It's easy. They have a calculator which tells you how many rolls you'll need, and they're pretty specific in regards to what you'll need when you're hanging the specific wallpaper that you are buying. Another thing you'll notice when you're buying wallpaper is that it tells you the type of drop repeat. And there's straight across match, in which your repeat matches straight across from piece to piece. There is random pattern match, where it usually happens with like textures and things like that, or with murals. And then there's drop match, which these are complex. They require a little bit more planning because they have to be aligned horizontally and vertically. There's a lot more waste involved with drop match, but overall I think it gives a room a lot more dynamic look. The patterns tend to be better, and you can really focus in on certain motifs and pronounce them with the way that you arrange the wallpaper better in drop match. I went ahead and purchased concentrate glue. I would not recommend this if you have the option to buy prepared paste. Nowadays, because most quality wallpapers are non-wovens, you do not need to paste to the paper, which is very different from what we were used to back when I was growing up. You used to have to put paste on the back of each piece of wallpaper, fold it over onto itself, and let it rest for 5 to 10 minutes while the paste absorbed into the paper. That is no longer the case. And also now with wallpaper, you don't have to worry as much with removal because the material is more of a non-woven. So it pulls down when you go to remove it in full strips. I experienced this in LA when I realized that the man hanging my wallpaper was just rolling paste up onto the wall and then placing the sheets of paper. My background being in Windows visuals and interior design, I was well versed in hanging, vinyls and fixtures, and this was just another medium in which to do that. So I set ahead to tackle this with no problem. I sliced about 3 to 4 panels width before I started working in each section when I began. I wasn't sure how long the paste would take to set, but it took a while. It's reworkable for some time. But in the main dining room, we picked the wallpaper Strawberry Thief by William Morris & Co. And this is an old Art Deco company. The wallpaper is a good quality, non-woven, but it is expensive. I attribute this mainly being to the fact that the licensing owned on the prints is very old and very protected. They've done collaborations with H&M and other companies, but this is one of their classic prints from the 1800s. But something that I noticed about this wallpaper, which I hadn't really understood when I would see normal floral wallpapers, was once you inserted these characters, you had these very strong motifs in the print. And although the repeat was horizontal in this way and it didn't stagger with the drop, I felt that the pattern really needed to line up to certain aspects of the architecture of the room. So, whereas many wallpaper hangers will tell you to start in a corner or near a corner, I started right smack in the middle of a wall because I wanted the motif in the wallpaper centered. Now, when I did that, we went ahead and picked out 2 walls that we wanted the wallpaper to specifically align with in the room. Now, instead of having one seam where the patterns don't necessarily match up in the room, that means you have 2. So we picked 2 spots that were above 2 openings into the room, and everything else worked out perfectly. The wallpaper, the minute that we centered it on the window wall, and when I flanked the opening to the dining room with the wallpaper became architectural. And so I want to stress the importance of that when you go ahead to hang wallpaper. If you're doing something that's a small ditzy floral, it's not really going to matter. But when you're doing something that has a heavy motif, especially something like in the next room I'm going to show you, it's really important that you create almost a feature aspect to part of the pattern. And in this case, I chose the center of the birds that were facing the flower. So I started with a vertical line that I used a level to create with a pencil on the wall. I centered it on the wall, and then I took the wallpaper and made sure that that line would match up with the center of the pattern. So as you can see on the wallpaper, the flower is the center of the pattern. I then measured from that center to the edge of the paper, got that measurement, and marked that line on the wall. And that became my vertical for hanging that wall and continuing around. I did not execute hanging these panels in any certain way. The only thing I left till the end was the 2 seams, which happened in 2 areas above the openings, again, like I said, that were about 3 inches in height. I just felt that I could use scrap pieces of wallpaper to end in those areas, so I wanted to do those last. The other thing is that I cut an extra 4 inches above and below my panels before I hung them. And I aligned them together so that I had multiple panels ready to go so I could hang 4 to 5 panels at a time. This saved me so much time. I knocked this out in 2 days by myself, and I maybe worked for 4 or 5 hours of the day. So in one day, you could get this done from morning to late afternoon. Another thing to consider is how you cut the wallpaper. Now, what I noticed with mine, and this may have been because I might have mixed the paste incorrectly and it was a little too watery, was that the paper became quite fragile when it was wet. So when the adhesive had soaked into the paper, my Xacto knife tended to drag along my straight edge and rip the paper instead of slicing directly through it. Now, I'm not sure exactly why that happened, but I do think I may have diluted the paste too much and not have let it thicken enough before I applied it. This was not the case in the second room that I did, but I do recommend that if you use an Xacto knife and not a utility knife, you replace the blade often. I used a wide straight edge that's probably 36 inches, and I cut large full panel trims off as I went. So first thing is first, when you are starting the room, you need to remove all your switch plates and plug plates, which in this case were plastic. If you're going to wallpaper, I recommend you get a solid brass or solid chrome silver, or you wallpaper the plates so that they blend in with the wall. You're already with wallpaper taking the interior up a notch, so you might as well take the time to fix any trims, repaint your trims, change out the switch plates, and get something that's a little bit more elevated. Here I figured out which wall I thought was the most prominent, as it could be seen from the kitchen and the living room. I then decided that with this toile wallpaper that we were using, I wanted to center the main motif on this wall. This wall is octagonal, so it has 8 walls inside, so the corners are not 90-degree angles. They're also not even, so it did pose a bit of a problem for me. However, what was the biggest problem was after I struck my center line and got that plumb and level, and then measured from the center of my wallpaper, I realized that the pattern on my half-drop wallpaper in this toile was not actually centered. It was about 6 inches over on the paper. So I had to go back and reconfigure and hang the first piece based on where the actual pattern lied on the paper roll. And that's why I said earlier, make sure you measure from the center of your pattern and not the piece of paper. With the drop repeat, you're going to have 2 different panels when you go to cut them to the length required. And if you recall, the pattern repeats every other. So you're going to have an A panel and a B panel. So here I'm just cutting the different panels, aligning the motifs for panels A and then panels B, and rolling them up under this desk and keeping them separate as I continue around the room. So as you hang each panel, you will start obviously with your vertical line, but after you've smoothed it out with either the brush that you can buy to smooth the paper to the wall or the flexible burnisher, I would recommend that you check that the leading side of your panel that you're going to put the next piece on is vertical. In this room, I actually had a slight off vertical tilt. It's not visible with the eye, but by the time I rounded around the 8th wall, my horizontal repeat was off by about 2.5 inches, and I had to use a piece of decorative tape to disguise that corner. When you get to windows and doors, I actually found this to be quite easy and simple, just because I felt if you take your time, you can't mess this up. And if you cut little by little, you won't cut too far into your pattern to where the piece being adhered to the wall is sliced. So as you can see here, I go ahead and hang the wallpaper, and I try to match the vertical as close as possible. But when you're folding this paper around molding, it's actually quite difficult to get that plumb perfect. So what I did was I cut into where the window space would be, leaving a good 1.5 inches excess. And from there, as I began to smooth down the wallpaper, it was much easier for me to find the corners to work around, and I could strike off a vertical or a horizontal, go ahead and with this window I smoothed the piece above, and then I could work my way down from there. The only thing I would recommend is that if you have also space below it that you are wallpapering and it's all on one single sheet, you again check the verticality of the leading edge of the wallpaper. Here I filmed showing you the tiniest, maybe 1/2 inch sliver of paper that extended past the contour of the molding. So to keep it as one single piece, I went ahead and glued this with my fingertips and pressed it and smoothed it onto the wall with my fingertips. But I managed to avoid ripping the paper. After that, it was pretty much the home stretch. I had a couple of small pieces to put up and I was done. But overall, I was extremely pleased with how this turned out. And honestly, I really think in the design world, we need to have the audacity to throw pattern up on the walls and get back into really experimenting with color, because at the end of the day, you can rip it down if you hate it. If you have any questions or comments, please sound off below. I definitely will field anything that you guys leave me there, and thank you so much for watching. I had a lot of fun filming this and wallpapering this, and I really do recommend it for anyone who is even flirting with the idea of wallpapering a room in their house.